plane of our body, right? And so the cervical spine sort of represents the celestial bodies.
So think about where you live a lot of the time. Like, are you living with your head in the clouds, or are you really grounded on the earth? Like, I'm very much in the flying high a lot of the time, for example.
And so one of the ways that we talk about that in Jin Shin Jyutsu is we talk about unmanifested and manifested. So when we're looking at the cervical spine, we're talking more on an unmanifested level. And we can appreciate that when we see that the order of the six-pointed star has to do with the order of listening to pulses, the transformation of the pulse. And so really the cervicals talk to us about how matter transforms and how, like, basically ether becomes matter and then back to ether again.
So can you also see that as we're moving down the spine?
It's not linear like that in the spine. So we don't start with one and then if it was like that, then we wouldn't have to have the answer sheet, right? So we have this answer sheet.
So here you see all of what we've been going over, right? The cervicals, the thoracics, the lumbar circle.
So we started more on a manifested level in the lumbars, right? The sort of the earthly plane, and then we moved up here more into our minds, and talked about the zodiac. And so now we're up here, and so what I do with mine is I color all of these points on the star in so that I can, like, quickly know which depth I'm talking about, so that I'm not like, C1, wait, which depth is that?
Can we just go over that? Yeah,
okay,
briefly,
so with this first cervical vertebrae, it relates to Saturn. And so we have the planet Saturn, and Saturn relates to first depth. And so with Saturn is the planet with the rings around it. And so the way that I remember that is that first depth has a lot to do with boundaries. It's our surface skin. And so Saturn is the planet that has that sort of boundary around it.
Can you also talk about the order of transformation at the same at
the same time? Okay, so don't start with the first cervical,
right.
That's the thing.
That is too confusing. Maybe you can just touch on that.
There's a linear order going through each cervical vertebra, but the order of the transformation of the pulses is not like that. And when I wish I had a larger star, but when we see it, what we have is we have the energy coming first through C2, which is Jupiter, third depth, right? And it spirals in. C3 is fifth depth Mars, and then it basically forms a spiral that goes through the star like this. So the six-pointed star is really a two-dimensional drawing of something that's not just three-dimensional, but at least 4 dimensions, right? We have above and below, and we have depth, and then we also have time. And so this is really about timing, how things transform. You can't have transformation without time. You can't just grow like in a split second. You have to like move through your life to grow, right? And so that's what this is about. So the order then is that that we start out with third depth, which is fluff, right? So the pulse texture of third depth is fluff, and we talk about it like cotton candy. It's that pulse that when you reach in, you know it's there, but you can't quite figure out where it is. It's like a vaporization. Right?
And you can feel it on the body as well, right? You can feel the texture. It's kind of when you touch it and you
sometimes
kind
you
of go
just
through
sink
it.
in.
Yeah, you sink into it. That's that fluffy texture.
Yeah.
And so you can bring that back to that also.
Right. So third, what I would do is put a little green tip at the top of the star. And so that's the energy of third depth, of springtime. It's things starting to move before you see them moving, right? And then you go, and then that energy, which is like this, it's expansive, right? It starts to pull together, and when it starts to pull together, you get this, and you get this pulsation, and that's the energy of fifth depth, of Mars coming through. And so after spring we go into summer, and it's like that vibration of the cicadas, you know, that hot summer day where it's just like whoom, 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 like that, right? So the pulsing is starting to pull it into a rhythm. And as that pulls in more, we move into first depth, Saturn. So that's when we spiral back to C1. And Saturn's texture, or first depth's texture, is gummy. And gummy is like, it's congealing, it's sticky. And so that's when you feel the pulse, and it might, like, you feel like it sticks to your fingers a little bit before it lets go. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And again, it's also easier to feel on the body. It's just very easy to feel the gummy texture.
And like all of these have a variety, like, you know, because we're moving through time and stages. There's gummy that's closer to a pulsation, and then there's gummy that gets harder. And so the harder gummy is kind of like a hard rubber ball. You know, it can get really thick, but there's still kind of like something that's holding it all together. And first depth, Saturn is about like protection in that barrier, but first depth also is our center, and so it has these arms that pull all of the other depths together, and makes them relate to each other, helps them relate to each other. And so that we understand that through the gummy texture. Gummy texture is pulling everything in and packing it together.
Two questions. Number one, do you have copies of that chart for us?
I don't.
Have you stuck it through a photocopy machine? It can be hard to do.
These charts you can get if you take full
so
class.
yeah, we'll talk about it after, okay? Maybe we can get your copy.
So in the six-pointed star, we have 7 cervicals, right? Mm-hmm. And so as we're spiraling through, when we get to first depth, what happens is that the energy spirals through C4, which is related to the sun. And so we talk about the sun as 7th depth, but the seventh depth doesn't really have a texture that we talk about in the pulse. It's more that energy goes into that solar energy, and we get the light of the 7th depth, the spark of the 7th depth.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting, when I work on people, I very often find that the C4 is a little bit out or congested.
Yeah.
And so that's very important also where they are in their lives, right? Since it's the light.
Yeah, and if you're at
it's on the level at
12,
12.
if you're holding someone's neck and you ask them to lift their chin up a little bit, your fingers will fall into a crease, and that will be right where C4 is.
Oh. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So once it passes through the 4th cervical, then we were at gummy, right? We get this light of the 7th depth, and what happens when gummy gets harder? It turns into rocks and rods. It's solidified. So gummy is the act of solidifying. Rocks and rods are solid, and that is the texture of 2nd depth, Venus.
So you feel it when you comb out and you feel those rocky kind of, or those rocks and rods. It feels like this very tight muscles. That is the texture of that 2nd depth, which you can again also feel in the pulse, in the wrist.
Right. So instead of gummy, you can squeeze a little bit. You know, even when gummy is really hard, there's a give there. Rocks and rods just meets you right at the surface and is like, no, I'm not budging, right? And 2nd depth, the 2nd depth pulse is like that. It almost it can have like a metallic sound. In Jin Shin Jitsu we talk about second depth being air, but in manifestation, it's the metal element. And so it can sound metallic. It can feel cold and metallic sometimes.
And when you stay with it, it does change.
Right.
Right? It feels like it's not going to change. It feels so solid, but when you stay with it and you're patient and trust, it's going to open up.
Right.
And go to the next texture.
Right. Why? Because the natural order is that things will transform. So we don't really have to worry about it or do anything. This is the beauty of Jin Shin Jitsu, that I think other modalities get lost in doing stuff. But what we know in Jin Shin Jitsu is that this order and this pattern is nature. And nature will always prevail and will always keep things moving. It might get stuck in certain ways. We might have issues with one depth or another, and that's when we hear that in the pulse or feel that in the flesh. But the nature is that it will always move through. There will always be a season that comes after this one. Sometimes the winter feels like it's never going to end, but spring always does come.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's really
Hopefully.
to trust. Sometimes I work with someone new and I don't feel a pulse, and sometimes it takes almost 20 minutes, and I just stay with it. I just stay with it till it opens. I mean, Mary said you don't need to stay longer than 20 minutes, but I do really give it a time and trust that it's going to open, and it does. It always does. And when we work for an hour, I always feel the body cannot resist the energy, and it just happens. You can't. You don't have to believe in it. You can't. In the end, the body is just going to surrender. And everybody that has experienced Jin Shin knows that feeling, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah? Yeah.
And it wants to.
Yes.
It wants
to go to health.
Without our minds having to be there. The energy wants to keep moving and keep transforming. And that, I don't know, I find that totally beautiful. So that we get to these rocks and rods, and we feel like that's the end. What can you do with a rock and a rod? But what starts to dissolve that is the water element. And water, we see that with caves. We see that with geology, with erosion, that generally water has this soft, subtle way of seeping through something that's the hardest thing and transforming it. And so with the water texture, fourth depth, we hear gurgles, we feel gurgles, and we hear gurgles.
Yeah, gurgles in the stomach. I had somebody yesterday, she's like, oh, that's my turkey sandwich, but she gurgled so much. That was not the turkey sandwich. The whole hour she was gurgling it. So that's how you hear that. You've had some small ones, right?
Yes. So there's a sense of flowing. There's a sense of flowing in the pulse.
And that's letting go of that 4 steps. It's letting go of 4 steps.
Yeah. So that's how I think about the cervicals. As I think about the transformation of the pulses. And when I first started learning Jin Shin Jitsu, I was like, how do you remember this order, right? Well, one, it's what we learn in chemistry, and I know that for most of us that was a long time ago. I had to take it twice because I had waited too long. So I had to take it
to manage
again.
This thing.
But when in chemistry or in Western science we talk about the 3 states, right? Solid, liquid, and gaseous. So in Jin Shin Jitsu we just talk about it in 6 states. And actually, if you go further into chemistry, there's more states than just those 3. But so that's what we're talking about. We're talking about how do we go from solid to liquid to gaseous, and then back. And that's really what we're talking about with the umbilicus flow too. The umbilicus flow in Chinese medicine is known as the triple heater. We call it something different, and I think we have a very wonderful understanding of umbilicus flow, but in Chinese medicine it's called the triple heater, the triple warmer, and it has to do with basically with 13, 14, and 15. and the 13s have to do with
This
like
is
a
another.
gaseous state.
We're going to talk about this in the next study circle.
Anyway, that's a preview.
That's
I
a
have to
preview.
take
Maybe
off.
that will be our next topic next month. Yeah, talking about the diaphragm and umbilicus.
But
I
it's
like
all
that.
about how we move through those elements and stuff. So
Yeah.
I'll just say, think about using the umbilicus flow if the pulse is not transforming regularly.
Nice.
Is that a good?
Yeah, I
is
like
that a
that.
good way of saving
Yeah,
myself
yeah, I like that a lot.
from rambling?
Great.
Think about using umbilicus flow if you feel like the pulse is not transforming in an orderly manner.
Yeah, very often I also stay on the coccyx sacrum area till it comes in, because then again, when you look at the order of creation, it is the one before the higher vibration, the third depth, and so staying with that also I find very helpful.
Yeah. And in all of these orders, we tend to start with third depth as like the opener. And here, even though cervical 1 is related to Saturn, the energy really, we talk about the energy coming through cervical 2 and relating to third depth, that evaporative pulse, the fluff. And then it becomes more solid. And so that's
Yeah.
another way of thinking. The sacrum has so much to do with third depth. And so that's why we often start there.
Yeah.
Because it's inviting that like unmanifested energy into the body.
Mm-hmm.
And third depth, because of its unmanifested nature and that fluff, has a lot to do with transformation.
Mm.
And we see that in the
Beautiful,
meaning of the
yeah.
first third depth safety energy lock. I have to stop now.
We call them locations.
Location.
Locations. Why do we call them safety? I call them safety energy location in the book. And it's because they are areas, right? The safety energy locations. And they are big. And they're not always locked. So they can lock the safety energy location. So that's a tiny, still SEL. Instead of lock, I call them location. So we'll start to use that term a little bit more. This
I
was
like more words.
Beautiful.
So I'm happy with location.
Yeah.
Also, I mean, I like that there's different translations.
Yeah, and different. We can explain it and talk about it, right? So
Yeah.
this was beautiful, Jules. Thank you so much for presenting this. Right? Are there any questions? Any questions? I think it gives us something to think about and study. I mean, this kind of presentation is something to go back to and listen to, and really absorb it and start to use it in your practice. So, all right, Pretty, let's go. We'll just do a little. Oh, yes.
Does the book go through the basics from square one? 'Cause I need to review things. I know we're on the air, but I need to review things from square one.
Yeah,
The
it's
book
just
goes-
self-help.
Yeah.
It's self-help. It's all self-help. Yeah.
It goes through the basics of Shinjin Jiu-Jitsu and
Yeah.
from the very beginning.
We don't talk about what she just talked about here.
And the book goes from the very
It's-
beginning, right?
It's only self-help.
But what it does have is it has the safety energy locks.
Yeah.
It goes through all the safety energy locks. It talks about the first three.
Yeah.
Right?
The main center source, the supervisor, and the mediator. It has the 12 organ functions. It has mini flows for self-help, and it has 70 symptoms.
So it really does cover almost everything, but through the lens of self-help. So it doesn't show you the full flow that we talk about in a longer class, but it shows you how to work with yourself and be able to address any of those.
Yeah, you can apply it to
levels.
others. It's enough information, but it doesn't go in the
Can or
technique.
can't? Can or can't?
You can apply these flows to others. Yeah, but it doesn't go into the technique as much as we do today in these study circles. Because for new people, it's much, right? This
Yes.
kind of
Yeah.
information.
I'm trying to grasp because I've just started.
It took me 30 years, and you?
Yeah. I'm
So
still
it
learning.
covers the book covers the
Oh.
basic elements of self-help.
Yes, yeah. I'm still learning too, a lot. I mean, this was an amazing presentation, and we have to keep studying it and looking at it and going back to it. And Jules is in school right now, so it's very fresh also. Well, I know they're not teaching this exactly, but she's in the study
No, but
mode.
I'm
And
seeing the connections and everything, and it's really fast. I mean, that's why I went back to school, because I love learning and I love continuing to like delve into Jin Shin Jyutsu and where it comes from and what it's connected to. You know, and we see that from our teachers too. You know, we see Mary just read whatever she read. She found connections to Jin Shin Jyutsu, and
it is all connected. I mean, to all the ancient traditions, right? Ayurveda and right. I mean, yeah. Okay.
We all seem to have some sort of a common thread connecting them, is what I'm beginning to realize a little bit.
Yes.
I mean, in a very broad, vague way, but there seems to be connection which is quite delightful in some manner.
Well, thank goodness. Can you imagine if they were all completely different? And it's like, then it's like, which one do you believe? But they all are the same, and they're so old, thousands of years old. So. So I would like all of you to come around, or at least people who would like to share. And Lisa, you're one of them. I mean, you can come in and put some of your input. Yeah. Jules, please. Also, if I go like off on a tangent that is not accurate, please stop me. Okay. Sometimes my mind just.
I'm the expert at tangents. If you guys haven't noticed.
Okay, so what I would like to talk about an overview of what we've covered in the past few months. And so let's start with Leslie. How can we see the depths on the body as we have discussed? Just take one subject matter that you're comfortable with. You can think about the fingers. You can think about the toe.
I mean,
there's many different levels.
I'm looking at her hands, which are very much at waist level. She's very focused on her waist here.
Let's talk about the depths, if you can.
Yeah.
So you can go through the fingers or toes, organ functions, lumbar circle, toe flows. This is how you start to think. The longer you practice, this is what you start to observe all of it. So over the past few months, we've broken down everything per section. But when we give a session, we take all of it in consideration in an instant, right? So that is where the art comes in and the lifetime study. So again, you can take it very simple if you go to the self-help book, but then to put the whole picture together is where you start to see it from all these different perspectives, which is where it's so beautiful. After all these years, I'm totally not bored. Right?
And then you start somewhere, right? And wherever you start, there's nothing wrong with where you start.
So that's what I wanted you to do. So just start somewhere. Like you have this body. Thank you.
Well, I'm I'm sort of struck with her attention to her waistline.
Okay. So which depth are you come to mind?
What's your waistline?
Yeah. Oh, your kidney and liver.
Okay. So which depths can you put those in? Kidney. Which depth is kidney? Okay. Fourth depth. Right.
Yeah.
And liver?
Third. Yeah.
Yeah. Third depth.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
So third and fourth depth.
Okay. So as you're observing that, you start to look. I mean, I'm just showing how my mind works when I give a treat. So you're thinking already third and fourth depths. Is it anywhere else that you can see that showing up, or with a quick? Please jump in, Terry, everyone. Sandra, just jump in. And is there anywhere else where you can recognize third and fourth depths in the body?
I right away thought of third depth because of our hip lines here.
Okay.
Because the third depth is right here in the...
So something third depth about this body.
Do
you want to feel and see if there's any fluff anywhere, because that would be the texture related to third depth, just to confirm. What do you see? Her what?
I think it's 13.
This?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's high.
Good.
Yeah.
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 And also this is where fourth depth comes together, right? In the order of creation. So again, fourth depth and third depth. Good.
I mean, one of the first things I noticed is that she's wearing blue. You know, both the pants and the
That's fourth
shirt
depth.
are blue. There's some white in the shirt too, but that's fourth depth.
Mm-hmm.
Fourth depth.
Mm-hmm.
And also third depth, going back to fourth and third. I'm just looking at her thighs here, and the toe flows go through here, right? Toe, you see, if put your hand here now before it opens, but if you want to feel how kind of tight it is, how she's holding, again, liver and kidney energy flow through there. So we're discussing it on many different levels here. We're discussing the toe flows that come up. That's on an organ function level. And here, waistline. So here, on the order of creation level. So all these things you start to put together.
Yeah. And it's not, well, actually she just corrected it, but her feet are very straight. You know, lots of times people's feet are out or something like that.
So where would you go for that?
Well, it's just drawing my attention to her toes, so I'm thinking toe flow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, toe flows.
So I'm thinking with the texture, I'm thinking gummy
Yeah, okay.
on her arms.
Mm. And
Yeah, you want to feel her arm? Because her arms are very full. Do you? Yeah.
Yeah,
It's kind
I
of a
think
solid gummy, right? It doesn't have this, like the gummy bearer.
It doesn't
I feel it
spring
too.
back.
It doesn't spring back
Yeah.
as
Mm.
much.
It's a little like tacky. Like
So that would bring in a first depth, some first depth. So in effect, we can recognize all the depths in the body, and then you start to decide which one is the cause and which one is most in need to begin harmonizing, right? What else? Jules?
How do you do that?
Like, just by what we're doing now. Then you can please somebody listen to her pulse. Lisa, do you think you can sit here and hold her fours so that somebody is... Lisa's I love when she holds the fours. Yeah, that would be really good. So, the thing what we haven't discussed is the depth on the head. But the fours and the cervical one is really full. And that is, again, related to fourth depth on the head, right? In the four here, the back of the head. Fourth depth, and then fourth depth, and then third depth. And then sixth depth. And then inside is fifth depth, and second depth, and first depth. So again, they're all the... So again, like that, when this is really tight, again, I also, again, related to fourth depth on a different level. This is where it's an art, and this is where, you know, the more technique you understand, the more you can apply the art. It's like Lisa as a painter. I mean, you have to have some technique in order to paint, right? I mean, to really make it like limitless.
Yeah, a lot. And also it's lifetime learning, lifetime, practicing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But it's
Same.
the imagination that takes you to the art, you know?
Yes.
I mean, you know, you do know how to apply the paint and you know, what creates depth and all those things in art. But it's the imagination that sets you free.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we practice the technique,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mhm.
We practice on people. We practice listening to the pulses so that our intuition can come through and have a
Mhm.
voice.
Mm-hmm.
Because without the technique, we don't have it. Our voice doesn't have a medium.
Right, right.
I mean, that's
Right.
so beautiful that there is such a great technique, so we can really focus in on specific projects as well, and be so focus. And then it has a lot to do with intention, of course, as well. Right?
Mhm.
Intention is so important.
Yeah.
That's where the spiritual part comes in, which I
Right.
love, and the philosophy.
It's a constant like seesaw. You know, you develop the technique, but you can't hold too firmly to that. You know, you have to be able to let go and trust,
Yeah.
and then, you know, and you do that, but then you need to learn more. That, you know, the creativity makes you want to learn more.
And also, we would maybe approach it differently, completely, and they're all fine ways,
Right.
right?
They're all
Lisa and I both.
What?
Lisa and I both make art, but I don't think that our work looks anything alike.
But I think that's also you call the art of Jin Shin. There is this artistic element in this healing, you know, practice that is really, to me, I relate to my painting a lot, and even the abstract, you know, aspect of it. Yeah. So.
Yeah, just a word about, because I'm using the art of Jin Shin, and I explain again in the book why, but it is because Jin Shin Jitsu, the word Jitsu is very hard for people to remember, and because we're reaching out to a bigger audience and putting this on the map, Jitsu means art, so the art of Jin Shin means the same, because I wanted to have a kanji made, and it's exactly the same kanji as Jin Shin Jitsu, the art of Jin Shin. And I talked to Chi about it, and she said it's exactly the same. So I just for our community to know that I didn't like change anything and really made it just available. And then just one more point there, and then we'll get off, Michael. So we're putting Jin Shin on the art of Jin Shin on the map, right? So my son Tyler and his girlfriend Abby, they're on a road trip right now, driving from New Orleans to San Francisco, and they're going to stop at every bookstore with the book and promoting the book, and they're creating content. So you will see it on Facebook and Instagram. They're going to post, and so we're literally putting it on the map and introducing it to the people. So yeah, so you'll see more fun things
The
like
Jin
this.
Shin ambassador.
Yes.
As a practitioner, you determine there's too much energy on one level and deficiency of energy on another level, and you want to shift the energy from where there's too much to where there's not enough, right?
Jules?
By whatever technique you use to do that. Is that correct?
In Jin Shin Jitsu, we don't really talk about excess or deficiency in that way. We don't diagnose in that way. We might notice that one area is more full and one area is less full, but with all of the flows and the holds that we use in Jin Shin Jitsu, it's really a method that balances. So the body innately knows how to balance. So we're not thinking that we're directing the excess to where it's deficient, or
I mean,
we're
helping the
moving.
body do that itself. That's
Yes,
fine.
we're helping the body. Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying, and there's other modalities that diagnose more in terms of excess and deficiency.
I mean, I heard you guys talking about it, but
I think when we talk, I think that when we tend to talk about it, it's more that we go to where the need is. You know, and on some level, sometimes that's a deficiency, and sometimes that's an excess.
Yeah.
But we're not
as Wayne
really
says, we're looking for the
focused on
harmony
it.
also, looking
Yeah.
for the harmony, and that is also a beautiful way and positive way to look at it,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. So
So you
the
can't go
only thing
wrong
is,
with it either. That's the thing.
It's not necessarily that your statement is wrong. It's just about what lens are you approaching it through. What lens are you coming through? And we're really, with Jin Shin Jitsu, it's not really about diagnosing or really about us, in quotes, doing something. It's about us being with this energy and creating a space where the energy actually is what's healing.
And you can play with this. If you're really doing, the energy is not going to move, right? You have to, as a practitioner, connect to source energy so that we're not doing and trying to. That's the practice too.
Yeah.
The book, I would assume, goes through, if you want to maintain self-vibrancy and top-of-the-line, high-level wellness and vibrancy, the book has self-help exercises and positions and mudras and katas and all that to do this for yourself, right?
Yes.
Okay, keep
Yes.
your energy vibrant and
Yeah.
flowing. Okay, fine.
Vibrant.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll end it with there. And we'll see you all next month. Have a good... Let's have some practice here. Okay?
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.